Hey guys! It's been a while, hasn't it? It's been since well, let's check here. 2014, February 2nd. It's been a little bit. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be trying to do, full disclaimer, right before we get into it, one take. My goal is to get this done in all one take. This is like my fourth or fifth time trying to do this now, but you know what? I want to try to do it. Obviously, I'm going to edit this, but I like how one take videos can just flow sometimes. So that's what we're going to shoot for. Also, we are not going to be covering industry in this video. That's going to be in another video to come. So keep an eye out for that. But we're going to be talking about specifically mining today. If you guys are left with any questions, I have an in-game chat channel called EEPonEVE, all one word. It's going to be typed down in the description below, and you can also see it right here where my cursor is. And this video is actually going to be kind of a redo of a mining introduction video that I did way back when. And actually, the last time I uploaded was that video, this video that you see here. So let's jump into it. So what we're going to be talking about today is what mining is and its different variations. I will say that we are going to be covering the ore mining aspect of mining today. So we're not going to be covering ice harvesting, gas harvesting, or mercoxit mining in detail, but I will explain what they are. We're going to be talking about the Venture and the mining barges, plus some fitting examples, as you can already see up on screen up here, the Venture here, and this is a Retriever here. We're going to be talking about their T2 variants very briefly. We're going to be talking about the industrial command ships, which are designed for supporting mining fleets. We are going to be covering the drones that you may or may not want to use while mining. And we're also going to be covering the different mining styles, and in that order. So if you decide that there's something you want to look for, don't be afraid to skip through the video and just find the information that you need. Again, this is going to be a long video. Don't be afraid to skip through, and don't be afraid to pause and rewind. So without waiting too much longer, what is mining? So mining in EVE Online is kind of the core of the game. It's one of those things where it's very easy to get into, and you play a much bigger part than you realize, even as a new player. Everything in this game is player created, either through industry, which is a result of mining, or through killing NPCs and looting their wrecks, which is a very common way to buy things because they tend to be a little bit better than manufactured goods. But manufactured goods is what's required for Tech 2 modules, which is an even bigger market than the meta variants that you would get from NPCs. So mining is a very, very core part of this game. Also, mining is what's required for all the ships in this game to be produced. So you cannot get free ships outside of very, very specific reasons, like your industry or your career agents when you first start. So there's a few different kinds of mining. There's ore mining, which we'll be talking about today, as I mentioned. There's ice mining, which is not too far different from regular ore mining, but there are some notable differences. I will briefly cover that. There's gas harvesting, which is notably different from ore mining, but it's kind of done in a similar way. And there's mercoxit mining. Mercoxit is a specific kind of ore that's mined, and it is used for the use in Tech 2 production. So most of you will not need to mine mercoxit. On top of that, mercoxit has some different mechanics. It can actually damage your ship depending on your skills and luck. So what we're going to be talking about first is a Venture, and we're going to go over some of its fittings really quick. We're going to talk about a Barge here in a sec and its fittings. So let's jump right into that. So I have an example fitting right here. This is kind of a general use fitting. Let's go ahead and simulate this. So we have our mining lasers. Obviously you need that. That's kind of a given. We have our mid slots, which are set up for tank. I'm going to cover that here in a sec on the next fitting. And we also have a mining laser upgrade. So our mining lasers, you can see that it's done volume per 60 seconds. So when you mine, do not look at an ore unit value or ore unit count as how much you've mined. It's all done by cubic meters, and all the ores have different cubic meter values per unit. So for example, a Veldspar rock will have a unit value or unit size of 0.1 cubic meters. So that means that you would need 10 units of Veldspar to fill up a cubic meter. Whereas a unit of spodumene, which is a nullsec ore, very high value, that is 16 cubic meters per unit. And in order to refine any ore, you need to have 100 units of that ore. So you need to look at it as cubic meters, because that's how you mine it. You don't mine it per unit. So when you're doing your calculations and you're trying to figure out which ore is going to be most profitable for you, do it by volume. So there's that, and there's also cycle time reduction, which we'll talk about later on when we hit on the industrial command ships. The mining laser upgrades, what they do is they increase the amount that you mine per cycle, the cubic meter amount, at the penalty of increased CPU usage of your mining lasers, and they do stack on that penalty. So just be mindful of it when you are fitting multiple mining laser upgrades on a ship, that it's going to be very hard to fit it with all of your CPU requirements for everything else. On this ship as well, this is going to be a little bit different than our other example ship, which is going to be Retriever. It's a little bit more on the tanky side as far as its fitting is concerned. So you can see we have pretty even resistances across the board, and we have a shield extender. The shield extender will give us more raw HP, and you can see this example here. We have 1,406 raw HP units of shield. If we disable this, we drop down to 281 HP of raw shield hit points. So that's almost a that's about little over an 1,100 HP increase. That's many times more than what you have stock. So that's a big difference there. And these are resistance modules. This is a passive resistance module, which does not require any capacitor, but it's not as effective as an active module, which will require a capacitor and to be actively turned on when you need it. So we'll cover more of that in the next fitting. Something to note about all of the mining ships that we're going to be covering is that they don't necessarily have a large cargo hold, but they have a dedicated ore hold that can hold ore and compressed variants of all the ore. So don't look at it as, oh, well, it has such a small cargo bay, why would I want to mine with that? Because you might see that it has 50 M3 of cargo bay. That's true, but that's not what you want to look at. Right here you can see I have a 5,000 cubic meter cargo bay on this Venture. The Ventures are going to be very good for starting out, and if you need to kind of zip around, you want to kind of sneak your way around, get some ore, but you don't really want to get caught. The way it survives is that it doesn't get caught. It can escape. So for the other variants of mining ships that are typically used, they're called mining barges. Right here is a Retriever example. This is kind of a cookie cutter fit with some exceptions that I'll go over a little bit more like I talked about in the last one. Instead of normal mining lasers, we have strip miners on here. Basically the same mechanic as a mining laser, it's just that the cycle times are increased, but they mine significantly more. So actually a great example of this, you can see I'm hovering over here. The cubic meters per second is 8.4 per second. If I go back to the Venture fitting, 3.4 meters per second. So the Venture does mine significantly more. It does have a larger tank, but not by much. But you can also see we have 3 low slots here, mining laser upgrades, and you can see our capacitor, or not capacitor, but our CPU is pretty close to being maxed out. We only have 14.9 out of 314.6 left over. So other than that, again, another passive shield module. And so I wanted to talk about more of the resistances on this ship because it's a better example. So let's just say, briefly speaking, because I plan on doing a fitting theory video for armor and shield separately from this video, on this fitting, you can see that it has a 64% resistance to kinetic due to the shield module. So if you were to have 100 raw damage coming into your ship, you are only going to be taking 36 damage actually applied to your ship because of this resistance. Whereas if you were to take, let's say, some thermal damage, which is only at 20% resistance, if you were to take 100 damage of thermal damage to your ship, you would actually take 80 of that. So you can see how the resistances, depending on where you are for the NPCs, can actually help you survive a lot easier. Against players, these ships don't have enough HP to realistically be able to survive on their own for unrelated reasons due to hit points, and actually a roll bonus on the Venture here. I'll show you. It actually has a really cool trait where it has a warp core stability bonus, which means that if you get warp disrupted up to a certain degree, you can still get away. So again, all these mining ships have their different roles. And for the Retriever, on this example fitting here, before I get too much carried away, we do have rigs on this one. We didn't have rigs on the Venture because we want to keep costs down. That Venture is more of a introductory Venture. Whereas on this Retriever, it is definitely not an introductory level ship. It is a kind of a ship of the line when it comes to a mining fleet. We have a processor overclocking unit, which is a rig that gives you more CPU. And then we also have 2 core defense field extenders, which acts like the shield extender that we had on the Venture. So you can see if we disable these, we drop down to 2,875 raw HP, whereas with these on, we have 3,802 raw shield HP. So they definitely make a difference. Next up, so we've kind of covered those fittings a little bit. These ships all do have Tech 2 variants. We can see that by going to the info, go to variations. So for the Venture, they have the Endurance, which is a very cool ship. It doesn't get the same escapability bonus, but it does have a shield resistance bonus, and it does very good with ice harvesting. Not as good as a mining barge, but it can do a very good job, and they're surprisingly survivable. I've actually had the most survivability out of, like, long-term survivability out of a mining barge or any kind of mining ship out of an Endurance. Purely because of its size and its agility, it can mitigate a lot of damage. Again, don't want to get too far into that, but it's just good to know. They do get a mining ore bonus, but as you can see here, there's 2 different reduction duration bonuses on this ship. So those do stack together. It has a 300% ore mining yield bonus, but that can be slightly deceiving because it only fits 1 mining laser. I've used these a lot. They definitely do ice mining better. They're a ton of fun to fly, and what's really, really cool about them is they have a massive ore hold for their size, 15,000 cubic meters. That's gonna be larger than about half of the mining barges that are available, including their Tech 2 variants. So very, very cool ships. The other variation is called a Prospect. This is kind of on the opposite side of not opposite side, but it approaches survivability in a different way. So what's really cool about a Prospect is that it can covert ops cloak, which means that if you have the skills to use a covert ops cloak, you can warp around cloaked, which means that you can sneak around. You can basically sneak into somewhere, steal the ore that you need, right, and then bring it back to somewhere that's safe and do it in relative safety. It's going to be very, very hard to catch a Prospect that's flown properly. It does have a larger ore hold than a Venture. It has a 10,000 M3 ore hold, as you can see here, which isn't as much as the Endurance, but it is a lot more than the Venture, and it makes a big difference. This does a better job of ore mining than anything else, but it does have a bonus for gas cloud duration, gas cloud harvesting duration, I mean. So this would be a good option for gas cloud harvesting, but the Venture gas cloud harvests better than the Prospect. The Prospect is just more survivable. So again, they all have their bonuses. So the Venture is sort of like a really low level escapability style of mining ship. The Endurance is supposed to be able to go long amounts of time and get a lot of ore and have the tank and escapability to get around. Something else on the Endurance, while it's on my mind, because I did forget to mention this, gets a really cool bonus for covert, or not covert, but normal cloaking durations. And you actually do not have a penalty to your speed with a normal cloak, which again is very, very, very handy on this ship, because that means that you can use a normal cloak. You don't get a speed reduction, which pretty much every other ship in the game does, but you cannot warp with it cloaked. So you can still stay somewhere, stay cloaked up, and just kind of wait out the enemy a little bit. So it's survivable in a different way. It's designed to endure, as the name suggests. So onto the Tech 2 mining barges and the mining barges themselves. We're going to open up the market for this just because it's a little bit easier to see. Give me a sec here. I'll pull these up. As I said, I've already taken this video a few times now, so I've kind of gotten the flow a little bit. But so we've got 3 different ships. We're not going to go in the advertised order here because it's in alphabetical order. We're going to talk about it in kind of role order. So we're going to start with the Procurer. The Procurer is sort of like a it's designed to survive, not in the same way that an Endurance or a Venture would. A Procurer and its Tech 2 variant, a Skiff, which I'll cover here in a sec, just have raw HP. They are very, very tanky. They have a similar tank in as far as raw HP goes compared to a battleship, which is very considerable. They don't mine as fast as the other mining barges, but they do have a moderate size ore hold, They had, I believe, a 12,000. Let me double check. Yep, 12,000 ore hold capacity, which is considerable. It will fill up, but it will last you long enough. So this is the kind of ship that I would say if you are just getting into a mining barge and you don't really have the money to replace your mining barge, but you still want to use it because you need to make money and you have the skills for it, this would be a great ship for you to get into. You have a very, very low likelihood of losing the ship, especially in high sec, and it's actually cheaper than the other two. So the next step up was going to be the Retriever, which is what we use as the example ship here. What's cool about the Retriever is that it does mine faster than the Procure. It has a paper tank, which means that it really doesn't have much of a tank. As we saw in the example here, it's about twice as good as a Venture, which isn't saying a whole lot, but it's enough to survive an attack and to give you reaction time. You're not going to get blown on and then just burst into flames. It's not that bad, but grand scheme, it won't last you too long in a fight. But what's really cool about a Retriever is that it has a massive ore hold. And as you can see here, it has a bonus for the ore hold capacity. If we go to attributes, it starts off at 22,003. At level 5, that is 27,500 cubic meters of ore hold space. That is the same size as a jettison can. So like if you jettison stuff into space, it creates that can. It's the same size as that can. Very, very cool, especially for solo miners. And the last kind of Tech 1 mining barge is going to be the Covetor. So the Covetor is a fleet-based ship. It has a notably higher ore yield amount. Like per minute, you mine a lot more in a Covetor. The problem is with them is that they have, as you can see here, a relatively small ore hold capacity, only 7,003. On top of that, they have very little tanking capability, much like the Retriever. So they're designed to be used primarily in a fleet or in a situation where you have someone that can haul your ore for you. The Tech 2 variants of these ships are called exhumers. And again, we're going to talk about them in order like we did for the mining barges. So the skiff is much like the Procure, where it has a massive tank. It just does it better. It has more drone capabilities. It has significantly better shield stats. And it also has a slightly larger ore hold. So the Tech 1 Procure had a 12,000. This one has a 15,000 ore hold capacity. So let's look at the Mackinac here. The Mackinac, much like the Retriever, it has a very nice bonus for ore hold capacity. So the Retriever at level 5 mining barge has a 27,500 cubic meter. The Mackinac has a 35,000 cubic meter ore hold. So it will last a long time. The cool thing about all the exhumers is that they actually are significantly more survivable than their Tech 1 counterparts, and they have the fitting capabilities to reflect that. The skiff, we're talking about a very, very high level of battleship comparison of tank ability. The Mackinac and Hulk are somewhere in like a cruiser realm. So they will definitely survive a lot better than their Tech 1 counterparts, but they are significantly more expensive. And as far as the Hulk goes, again, much like the Covetor, where it's designed for fleet usage and it mines very, very fast, it does the same thing, just better. It is a true reflection as a advanced variant of its Tech 1 counterpart. So for the Hulk here, we only have an 8,500 cubic ore hold, but again, fleet usage primarily, so you're going to have the capability of getting your ore off to someone else to haul for you. So your job is just to sit there and mine very fast. Again, it has it has very good capabilities as far as tanking goes, and also its drones. So what we're going to talk about next is industrial command ships, and I've mentioned fleet mining with the Hulks and the Covers a few times now. The command ships are what it sounds like. They are sort of like the they're sort of like the hub for a mining fleet. They can provide boosts which increase your mining capabilities as well as range. In some cases, they have the capability of repairing other ships, depending how they're fit up. They can haul ore. They can provide protection. They can help with jet cam mining, which we will talk about here in a minute when we get to mining styles. You can see here the Porpoise and all of its bonuses. What's cool about them is that they can mine, but they use drones to do it. They're well bonused in drones. So you gotta you got to kind of figure where your break-off point is as far as when it's useful for just having all the characters in mining barges or when you should get a porpoise to boost. So personally, I found that to be around 4 mining barges or so is the kind of the breaking point where it becomes useful to have a command ship on grid. Because you got to realize that while it's going to be handy for you to haul, like you got to figure out at what point does it make sense financially to do so. They do cost significantly more than a mining barge, but they definitely amplify the capabilities. So on a porpoise, for example, I would say the breakoff point would be around maybe 4 mining barges or so. No particular kind of mining barges, just if you have 4 mining barges, I would say instead of getting a 5th mining barge, bring out a porpoise. If you are at 3 mining barges, I wouldn't really say bring out the porpoise would be financially worthwhile, but you still can. It will definitely help a lot. It's just you're not going to be making more ISK. You'll have a convenience amount though. So for the Orca is just sort of like a bigger version of a porpoise. Again, very similar stats. It can do a lot of different things. It has a tractor beam range. It has a survey scanner range. It has better drone yield, better drone damage. It just supports a mining fleet. Most people are not going to want to fly these ships. They are cool. They are fun, but you need to have a reason to use them. They are rarely worth it unless you have a bunch of friends to where they can benefit. A couple things I haven't talked about yet that I've mentioned now is survey scanners. So I've actually got one here, and what this does is it scans all of the asteroids within its range, and it tells you obviously what they are, right? But it also tells you how far away they all are, right, for each individual roid. It'll tell you its composition as far as cubic meters and units, right? So you can actually get a really good idea as to how much ore is left in an asteroid with a survey scanner. Very, very, very handy for mining fleets because you want to make sure that you, depending on the ships, you want to make sure that they're appropriately spaced out. That way they can actually benefit from the asteroids that they've chosen to mine. But that way you don't get to an asteroid and 2 cycles in, the asteroid's depleted. You don't want that. So that's where these are really handy. Another thing that's going to be very handy, and we'll talk about more here in a sec, is a tractor beam bonus as far as its velocity and range. That'll be useful in kind of spread out fleets. And so after the Orca, there's going to be a big jump in cost and skills and everything else, but you can get to a Rorqual. Again, similar idea, but this is sort of like having a small mining station. It can boost, it can shield repair, but it can also mine extremely well, better than a small fleet of mining barges can. So what a lot of guys will do with Rorquals is they'll actually mine either individually on Rorquals, very high risk. Definitely wouldn't recommend it if you're actually watching this video, but it's good to understand the ships that are out there. They make a lot of money. So these are typically going to be the ships that if you're watching this video, you are going to have someone else fly and you're going to benefit from them flying it. So there's no shame in not having the biggest ship, because the biggest ships tend to cost the biggest money, and the biggest money tends to be the biggest target, and those create the biggest losses. So if that loss is not yours, all the better, because people are going to want to get the most value in their kill. So you actually have a better ability to stay alive long term in a cheaper ship because it's not as desirable to kill. So it's sort of like, I don't want to really use this analogy because I don't want to be offensive, but it's sort of like tripping the fat guy. That way you can save the rest of the group from the zombies. It's kind of like that in a way. So I have talked about some things here that I haven't really quite covered, and that's going to be drones, which I'm going to talk about now, and then mining styles, which will make sense as for the industrial command ships, and we'll kind of wrap everything up. The drone options. So you can see here on these simulated fittings that I have up here, I have 2 different profiles of drones. On the Venture, I have mining drones, right? And on the Retriever, I have Hornets, which are combat drones. So really what you're going to need to do is decide, do you want to mine a little bit more and risk not having any defensive capabilities at all? Or do you want to not run mining drones and go for the defensive capabilities of potentially killing some of the rats, so that way you don't actually have to leave, or even just save your ship. So I'm not saying that you have to choose either way, but you need to make the best decision as to how you want to fly your ship. In a lot of cases, especially if you're fleet mining, use the mining drones. If you're solo mining, favor combat drones. There are some of the barges can fit multiple flights of drones, and they can't use them all at once, but you can change out your drones. So like the Mackinac, the Skiff, the Hulk, and the Coveter, and I think the Procure as well. I'll double check that actually right now, because now I'm kind of curious. Like I said, one take, but I would rather check. That way we know for sure. Okay, so drone capacity is 50 and bandwidth is 25. So you can have 2 different flights of drones on Procure as well. So what you can do is on those ships that I just mentioned, which is the Procure, Skiff, Coveter, Hulk, and the Mackinac, you can bring multiple flights of drones. So you can bring a flight of mining drones and a flight of combat drones to help protect yourself. So very good to keep that in mind. So when it comes to what drones you should use, that's situationally up to you. There's really no right or wrong answer. It comes down to preference and how you plan on flying the ship. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is mining styles. And what I mean by that is there's different ways to handle a way that you want to mine. You can do what's called jet cam mining, where this is done on a lot of ships that don't have a very large ore hole capacity. So like this would be done on like a Coveter or a Hulk, potentially a Venture. Basically, as you mine, you jettison it into space, and then you take that one jettison canister that pops up when you put something into space, and you just keep filling it. And so that's where the tractor beam bonuses come into play on the industrial command ships, because after you fill up that canister, you can let the guy who's in the command ship know, and he can tractor beam that canister in and then haul it in his ship. He'll store it for you. That way you don't have to deal with it. So you can continue to mine and be as efficient as you can. Another thing that's going to be really cool about that is that's more of a fleet mining style. So we're going to be talking about like, let's see here. We got solo, fleets, and everything else. So yeah, I'm kind of covering it all. But so jet cam mining can be done solo as well. That just means that you would fill up a can or two at a belt, and then you'd go dock up, bring back an industrial ship, and then just come make trips and just pick it all up. It is more efficient to do it that way, but it's riskier because it can get stolen. Someone can just come by and just take it from you. As far as fleet mining goes, there's a couple different ways to do it if you have a command ship on grid with you. They actually have a fleet hangar and an ore hold on them, so you can actually transfer your ore directly into them if you're in range, and they have a dedicated ore hold to haul the fleet's ore. It's going to be larger than any of the mining barges that are out there by a considerable amount. So that's a very cool mechanic. Again, it pays to work together. It pays to make friends. The other way that you can mine is just solo. And probably the best ships for this is either going to be a Venture or maybe an Endurance for ice, or a Retriever or a Mackinac, because those have the largest ore hole capacities, which means that you can stay in the belt longer. And sorry for all the ums. I'm just trying to keep my head straight. I'm a little bit on the tired side right now. But so by being able to stay in belt longer and having more ore hole capacity, you spend less time warping to the station to drop off your ore, which means that you mine more. So it's more efficient. I get a lot of people asking me, what should I fly? I don't want to have 20 different ships for the specific different ways I might mine at some point in time. I would honestly say, in my long time of dealing with a lot of new bros, a lot of miners in general, running fleets, running corporations, go for a Retriever. The cost is good. They're relatively easy to get into. They are very cost efficient, and they will still perform well in a fleet. Just because they're not a Coveter doesn't mean that you can't use them in a fleet. The Coveter is just better, but you can't really use a Coveter solo mining unless you are going to oh great, they just bumped me, but unless you're going to jet cam mine, which again you got to go and pick up. So you got to kind of weigh your costs. So there's really no downside to using a Retriever in a fleet other than the fact that it just doesn't mine quite as fast, but you have the ore hole capacity to give you comfort. You don't need to constantly be there updating your ship. So if you're in a fleet, or if you're mining solo, you do a mix of all, it sticks to a retriever. So something I actually did forget to mention for the command ships, and I can't believe I forgot to mention this, but I'm going to mention it now because we've kind of brought it up for fleet mining a few times now. The command ships will provide boosts. And what I mean by that is they can actually provide area of effect bonuses to your ships that they emit that actually will do one of three things for your mining ship. Well, 4 or 5, depending on how they're fit. But primarily the thing that matters the most is going to be that they can reduce your cycle time by a considerable amount. The most that I've seen was from a Rorqual, and that was like 53.7%, I think it was. It was like 53 point something, right? So it more than halved my cycle time. So instead of my mining lasers cycling, let's just say every minute, I was getting the same amount of ore every 30 seconds. So I'd mine double as much in the same amount of time, a little bit over. So they can make a massive difference. What else they can do that's really, really, really cool is they can boost your range. So most I've seen it was like 100 and I want to say it's like 170% or something like that. It was crazy. So it definitely took you up there. So let's just say you have a 15 kilometer range on your strip miners, right? Like we do on this here. It's 15 kilometers, right? Come on, load. Sorry about that. I don't know what was going on there. But anyways, continuing on. So those boosts are going to make a big difference for you in a fleet. So it really does pay off to mine. And that's why I said that there's like a kind of a breaking point when it comes to mining with like a porpoise or orca, for example, because you got to weigh in all of those boosts and the fact of how much it's going to mine on its own. And you want to be cost effective to do it that way. So at like 4 mining barges or so, if you can bring out a boosting ship, it will greatly increase the overall output of that fleet versus just bring out another barge at that point. But if you only have like 1 or 2 barges out, it doesn't really make a whole lot of financial sense to bring out a command ship, but the convenience of it is nice. You will make a little bit less money compared to a barge, but that command ship can boost, that command ship can protect, and it can also haul. So just to kind of wrap up what we've talked about, because I don't want to go on too long, we've covered a lot of information. Again, I really do encourage that you go back and review if you need to. Again, as I've mentioned, if you need to talk to a court member about this video, you want to send it off to them, by all means share it. That would mean the world to me. Again, if you've liked it, like it. If you've disliked it, dislike it. I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I would really appreciate if you let me know why you don't dislike it so I can improve my videos. If it's the one take thing, I don't know if I'm going to stick to it or not. But for this video, that's what I wanted to do. So I will talk to you guys later on. I hope you found this video informational. I know it's long and it was a lot of information at once, but I tried to do my best to make sure that everything was laid out for you. Some videos to look forward to in the future is going to be based on armor fitting theory, shield fitting theory, industrial basics. So like industrial would include refining and manufacturing, which would be kind of the next step after this. We're also going to probably touch on hauling, which is, I don't think will be a terribly long video, but I do want to touch on that because that is an interest. And some other stuff that I have in the works that I don't really want to talk about quite yet. I want to surprise you. So definitely subscribe. Definitely keep an eye out for that if you like this. And I really, really hope that you've learned something from this. Again, if you have any questions, I'm always in my chat channel, and if I'm online, I'll be more than willing to spend any of the time that I can to help you enjoy this game and understand it better. That's what I enjoy doing. So come find me. I'll see you in space.